Subscribe to our channel for new stories every day. I recently had a talk with my wife of 11 years. Sadly, it ended with her in tears. This reminded me of a similar situation 3 years ago when I almost lost my job. Back then, my wife Emily, also known as Emma, was so upset at the thought of me missing our anniversary that she insisted I'd come home. Fast forward to today, and now she's the one who won't be there on our anniversary. I didn't say anything to change her mind. Despite this, the past 12 years have been the happiest of my life. When I first met Emily, she was 24 years old and just starting her career in sales. She visited our architectural firm to convince us to advertise in fancy magazines, which at the time we couldn't afford. In the crowd, I couldn't help but notice an enchanting woman with black hair. After discussing the matter with my business partner, he helped me grab her attention long enough to ask her out. After our first meeting, she confessed that she knew we couldn't pay for her services. Even with that knowledge, I fell deeply in love with her. Our relationship developed over 6 months, and eventually she moved in with me for another 6 months as she transitioned from a more nomadic lifestyle to a stable office job. 4 months later, we tied the knot and became husband and wife. Every day, I still feel like the luckiest person alive for persuading her to marry me. With a sense of urgency, I dialed my boss's number once more. I've been with the company since the beginning when Alan first started it. Our small team of 4 designers achieved remarkable success by reducing production time in various fields. Alan, I know you're there. Please answer, I pleaded into the phone. Finally, I heard his voice on the other end. John, I'm really busy right now. He replied shortly. Deciding to keep it brief, I said, well, I'm leaving right now and won't be back until Monday. In response, he asked, leaving, where are you going? I'm going to celebrate my anniversary with my wife, I explained. I'll be back on Monday. Have a good trip. Don't forget to knock before entering, he quipped. I chuckled and replied, you always manage to make me laugh. I hear that a lot. Not from those who really know you, he teased. Apologetically, I added, I'm sorry, but ever since they brought this guy in to run Emily's department, there's been tension in our house. Maybe a break at the hotel will help diffuse the situation. I'd assume it won't hurt. Alan said, just do me a favor. When you're seeking adventure, remember me. Deal. See you on Monday, I said. I didn't hang up right away, but asked Alan's secretary Anne for a favor. She knew how to handle things, and I needed a plane ticket. After the conversation with her, I headed home to pack. While packing my suitcase, the phone suddenly rang. You have 45 minutes to get to the airport for security, Anne informed me. She'd secured a return flight for Sunday at 1:30 p.m. Unfortunately, there were no available rooms at Emily's hotel, so she booked one 2 blocks away. Had a safe trip? See you on Monday, Anne said. Hearing that, I rushed to the bathroom to grab my shaving kit, packed it quickly, and did a quick check of the room, even turning off the coffee maker, which was unusual for me, before hurrying to the car. Over 15 years, I've discovered several shortcuts that help me reach my destination faster. Despite my high speed, I made it to the flight with plenty of time to spare. After registration, security, and boarding, we finally got on the plane. Once I was seated, I put on my headphones and played some music. I'm a nervous flyer, and music helps me relax and stay calm. 3 hours into the flight, I was suddenly awakened from a pleasant dream about Emily and me by a gentle tap on my shoulder. I had fallen asleep, which wasn't surprising given my recent lack of proper rest. Part of it was due to work stress, and part was because Emily and I had been going through a rough patch for the past few months. For more than 2 months, she had been keeping her distance, not letting me get close. It all started when she told me about a colleague from another department getting a promotion and taking over her own. She was determined to prove that this decision was wrong and worked hard to show her worth. For the first 2 weeks, she came home exhausted, constantly discussing strategies to outshine Mr. Mark Reynolds. But over time, her determination waned, and after a couple more weeks, she mentioned that they had started cooperating. I became increasingly anxious as their joint mission to win a big client approached. Thoughts of a possible romantic relationship between them crossed my mind, but Emily always reassured me. Taking my bag out of the overhead compartment, I pondered how to invite Emily to dinner quietly without giving away the surprise. After taking a taxi to my hotel, I struck up a casual conversation with the driver who mentioned a charming, dimly lit restaurant located between our 2 hotels. It sounded intriguing, exactly what I had in mind. After checking in, I quickly showered and rushed out. I wanted to catch Emily before she left for dinner. Glancing at the clock in the lobby, I saw that it was almost 5:30. Observing the bustling street, I decided I could walk. I followed the directions given by the receptionist. The route was easy, and I made sure and noticed the charming restaurant mentioned by the taxi driver, which happened to be just a few steps from her hotel. Furthermore, when I exited the taxi, I left the driver a generous tip. At 5:50, I entered the hotel lobby and stood in line at one of the reception desks. I exchanged a smile with a woman who motioned for me to come forward. "Hello," I greeted her warmly. "My name is John Wilson. I'd like to know if my wife, Emily Wilson, is in her room right now. If so, I'd appreciate the chance to talk to her." "Emily Wilson, you said?" she asked, taking a moment to consult her notes. "Yes, she's a guest here. Give me a minute to check if she's in her room." With that, she dialed the room number. After a while, she turned to me with an apologetic tone. "I'm sorry, sir, but there was no answer. Would you like to leave a message?" "Not at the moment," I replied, disappointment creeping into my voice. I was hoping to surprise her. "We have an anniversary tomorrow. I'd be very grateful if you didn't mention our conversation." "No problem, sir. I wish you a wonderful day tomorrow," the woman added politely. "Thanks. I'm thinking about going to a restaurant. Maybe luck will be on my side," I responded. "Good night." Heading to the far end of the lobby, I spotted a noisy hall packed with people. They were working, serving, sitting, eating. It was very crowded, and I knew the chances of finding her there were slim. Then I noticed a restroom located on one side, closer to the back wall. I searched around, scanning left and right, desperately looking for any sign of her presence. Despite my efforts, she remained elusive. After finishing my business, I settled near the corridor entrance and scanned the room again. It still seemed futile. Finding her in such a crowded place felt impossible. Then I unexpectedly caught a faint sound of laughter reminiscent of hers. I followed the wall with my eyes, but tall booths obstructed my view, allowing only glimpses of the faces of the men and the women with them. Reluctant to approach any table until I could avoid her notice, I retraced my steps and turned my gaze toward the wall, slowly making my way along the row of tables one by one. I reached the third one from the corridor where I was standing, and there, in that very booth, I saw her. She sat there, engrossed in conversation with a man I didn't recognize. She looked radiant, dressed in the same elegant dress she always wore on evenings filled with dancing. Their interactions seemed relaxed, as if they were entirely at ease in each other's company. I couldn't help but wonder what was really going on between them. It seemed far more intimate than a typical dinner with a colleague. My heart raced as he leaned closer to her, prompting me to instinctively grasp the doorframe for support. As she bent down, their lips met in a tender kiss. Filled with mixed emotions, I decided to leave the doorway and move to the center of the hall, sinking into one of the padded chairs with a high back. Time seemed to blur. I sat there, never taking my eyes off their table. Suddenly, I heard her laughter again, drawing my attention. Turning my head, I saw her walking beside him, holding his hand tightly with both of hers. Their closeness, along with the general merriment, piqued my curiosity. They strolled past me just 15 feet away, and even though they conversed, my focus was solely on the adoring expression she wore as she gazed at him. It had been a long time since I had seen that look. At that moment, my breath caught in my throat, leaving me momentarily speechless. I headed for the exit, my expression likely betraying my displeasure. Fueled by a surge of determination, I walked straight to the sidewalk, never taking my eyes off them. She clung to his arm, leaning affectionately against him. I watched as they walked down the street, eventually turning a corner and disappearing into a restaurant I had noticed earlier. As I snapped out of my trance, I hurried toward the door, suddenly mindful of my surroundings. I decided to slow down, giving them ample time to move away from the entrance. I came to a halt, taking a few deep breaths to regain my composure. Undoubtedly, there was meaning in the expressions on their faces, but I wanted more than just suspicion. Summoning my resolve, I pushed open the door and cautiously entered, staying close to the wall. Since the entrance was unattended, I patiently stood there, letting my eyes adjust. Finally, my gaze settled on them, sitting at a table meant for two at the far end. I made my way closer, sticking to the walls. As I sat down at a small table, the waitress promptly appeared behind me. "What can I get for you, dear?" "What'll it be?" she inquired. I replied, "Double scotch on the rocks." I overheard their conversation. "Our meeting tomorrow isn't until 10, so we can celebrate late into the night," he said to Emily in a hushed tone. I'm glad you didn't let him manipulate you into going home. We wouldn't miss our 2-month anniversary for anything, she exclaimed. I can't believe it's been 2 months. It could have been longer, he remarked. If only you had accepted my offer at the end of my first week at work, he reminisced. She laughed and added, I had to play the innocent girl with you, considering that I'm supposedly married. She shook her head in disbelief, recalling the moment he approached her in the presence of Lisa and asked her out despite his own marital status. Lisa actually told me that you liked me, he mentioned. We should do something nice for her, because she played a significant role in bringing us together, Emily suggested. As the waitress approached, served their drinks, and swiftly walked away, they'd raised their glasses in a toast to the incredible 2 months they had spent together and the countless more to come. I'll do whatever it takes, he said as their glasses clinked together. There will be many more, she replied cheerfully. The waitress placed my glass in front of me and asked, Here you go, dear, is that all? I handed her a $10 bill. Thank you, ma'am, I said before shifting my attention back to the adjacent table. They glanced up, but seeing only a stranger paid me no mind. Emily, noticing his gaze, turned and looked at me. You know, a guy should always carry a camera for moments like these, I remarked. Her expression was truly stunned, and her lips moved soundlessly. Wow, 2 months. This is a special anniversary. I still remember mine, but after 11 years, it loses its novelty. Let's celebrate 2 months. It's a symbol of passion and prosperity, isn't it? A lovely couple like you definitely deserves a gift, so here's my offer, I said, tossing the ring in Emily's direction. And here's a surprise. Mark. Emily shouted, trying to calm him down before he got aggressive. Realizing that staying any longer would lead to trouble, I turned to Emily, who was struggling to restrain him. Tell him how lucky he is that he wasn't in my home. Please contact me and let me know where you'd like to receive your belongings. If you're wise, you'll avoid coming to my house. Applying ice might help with the discomfort, I stated, then turned and left. Leaving the nightclub, I walked briskly back to the hotel. It was unlikely that Emily knew my current address, and given my actions toward her friend, it seemed even less likely she would pursue me. To create distance quickly, I rushed into the lobby and approached the front desk. Excuse me, do you happen to have the contact numbers for the airlines? I urgently need to book a plane ticket, I asked. Certainly, sir. May I inquire about your preferred airline, as well as your desired departure time and destination? The employee responded. After providing all the necessary information, she assured me she'd inform me about any available flights in my room. Once back in the room, I began pacing. My mind was spinning. How could this have happened? Then a thought struck me. Maybe Emily had missed her true calling in life, given her convincing performances over the past months. As my frustration continued to mount, I realized I couldn't stay in the room any longer. Grabbing my bag, I headed down to the lobby. The receptionist, who had just finished a phone call, motioned for me to approach. Sir, if you leave now, you might make the last flight today. Registration closes in 30 minutes. If you miss it, the next flight is in 3 hours, she told me. I thanked her, hoping the taxi drivers in the area were reliable. I signed the cash receipt handed to me by another staff member. I'm sorry I have to cut my visit short, I said. Please stay with us next time. She responded, smiling warmly as I hurried to the exit. A rush of unforgettable memories washed over me. I quickly grabbed a taxi from the parking lot. I bet you $50 you can get me to the airport in under 30 minutes, I challenged the driver as I took my seat. You got it, boss, he replied confidently, snapping me back to reality. He turned out to be very experienced, getting me to my destination in just 20 minutes. I paid the meter fare, added a generous $150 tip, thanked him, and hurried inside. Reflecting on it later, I realized there was no need to worry. I had a few minutes to spare. After passing security, I waited for the boarding announcement. Unlike last time, when I needed music, I now had more than enough to occupy my mind. A funny thought crossed my mind. Emily's mother, Linda, never really liked me. While Linda seemed to have her husband, Martin, under her thumb, she treated him poorly, almost like he didn't matter. I couldn't tolerate her behavior, and she was aware of it. One day, she even accused me of eventually cheating on Emily, claiming she saw me glance at other women. Throughout the entire flight, doubts about what was happening gnawed at me. I pulled out the photo I always carried of Emily and me and studied it intently. The person next to Emily in the photo suddenly seemed unfamiliar. I glanced around to make sure no one noticed, then returned my gaze to the photo. In the picture, I stood beside her, but what caught my attention was how she gazed into his eyes. It made me doubt everything. Although men aren't typically known for their memory, I considered myself an exception. Like most women, Emily often tested mine by asking, "Do you remember this?" or "Do you remember that?" Unfortunately for her, I remembered everything. Every conversation, every plan, every close secret we whispered in the dark. Sitting there, I couldn't help but wonder. If I hadn't noticed what had been happening for 2 months, what else had I missed? The man had shown interest in her from the first week they met, but she claimed she rejected his advances to maintain appearances. The idea of them being together bothered me deeply. I formed a two-part plan. I'd go home, pack all of her things, and take them to her mother's house. Of course, Linda would find a way to blame me, but the truth was what I saw. When we arrived at the airport, our family life was unraveling. I headed straight to my car and joined the exit queue. The drive home felt like a blur, and I couldn't remember much of it. Nevertheless, I reached my destination. The journey's duration remained a mystery, but it didn't matter. Stepping into the dimly lit house, I felt an eerie sense of unfamiliarity. The thought that I had to get used to this sight as the new norm consumed me. After dropping my bag, I headed for the kitchen. On the way, I instinctively turned on the answering machine. A pleading voice on the other end said, "John, please don't do anything rash. I'm heading home to talk. Please wait until I get there." She sounded pained, conveying strong emotion. I believed a cheater deserved punishment, but I didn't want to hear it, especially not in that voice. So I reacted impulsively and banged my fist on the table. Maybe my actions were rash, but I needed to protect myself from making foolish decisions. It was clear I wouldn't be able to sleep that night. I went to the garage and gathered all the suitcases Emily had collected over the years, choosing a large black suitcase and a smaller bag for her clothes. I set them aside and took the rest to the bedroom. As I sifted through her closet, I carefully selected a few items, stuffing them into the large bags. I repeated the process several times before turning my attention to the dresser, which I hadn't opened in ages. For a fleeting moment, the idea of grabbing some snacks crossed my mind. I was supposed to go to her mother's house, but I didn't want to. I had opted instead for a solitary gathering of lox and marshmallows. I didn't want to deal with Linda or anyone else, so I took matters into my own hands. Instead of waiting for Emily, I impulsively went to the hardware store to buy new locks. Upon returning home, I realized I couldn't leave the pile of her belongings in the front room. Following my decision, I loaded everything into the car and headed to her parents' house. I drove carefully and unloaded everything near the garage, not wanting to burden Martin with extra work, especially since Linda and Emily wouldn't help him. As the third box hit the ground, Linda appeared. "Hi, John. What's all this? What's going on?" she asked. I explained. Well, when Emily arrived, she might need her clothes. Initially, I thought she'd bring them herself, but I couldn't wait any longer. They were cluttering the front room. Confused and looking pale, she inquired, "What do you mean, when Emily arrives? I thought she wasn't in town yet. Why would her things be here?" "Linda, I'm not entirely sure how she plans to sort things out, but I assumed she might stay with you temporarily. She may even be planning to move in with the person she's been spending time with, but I can't say for sure. That's why I brought her stuff," I replied calmly. Her face grew paler. "What are you implying? How can you accuse my daughter of such things? She had to stay there for work. She'd never cheat on you." Her voice trembled. "I even saw them together last time," I continued. "They looked happy. They were joyfully celebrating their 2-month anniversary at a lively nightclub near their hotel. I repeatedly asked her to join me at home for our anniversary, and she said she couldn't. Determined, I hopped on a plane to surprise her. However, when I arrived, I found them having an intimate dinner. The atmosphere was romantic, and I didn't want to intrude on their special moment. Besides, I saw them share tender kisses across the table. I needed time to gather my thoughts. When they passed me in the hotel lobby, she gazed at him and whispered in his ear. At that moment, I couldn't bring myself to confront them. I just needed some fresh air. But they left, heading to the nearest nightclub. I sat at a table nearby and overheard her saying she didn't want to leave him on their 2-month anniversary. Then he corrected her, saying it was actually their 3rd month. It dawned on me that if I wanted to leave, I'd have to intervene. I tried to stay inconspicuous, but I knew I had to find evidence. After 10 years of sobriety, I took my first sip of alcohol minus 10 years, Linda, since Emily expressed concern about my drinking, which she said could threaten our marriage. In that moment, I gave her my wedding ring, thinking it was a sensible gesture to let each of them keep their own tokens. But honestly, I preferred his gift over mine. Now, I'm sure she'll be back soon, and there will be more drama. She's likely to seek refuge here, and I want you to know the truth. I saw it with my own eyes. For the past 2 months, I've been living alone while she's been with him since he joined the company. It's astonishing how she's changed, given the upbringing you provided. For 3 straight months, she lied to me every single day without a shred of guilt. If you think I'll take her back, then you're even more naive than she is. It seems she's quite attached to this guy, and he can have her. She won't need to hide their relationship anymore. Once she's done with her dissections, I'll direct her here. You can see for yourself who's lying. As I told you I was packing, if she picks up, you can relay the message exactly as you see fit, including that I'm eager to see how she handles this. With those words, I got in the car and drove away. Feeling restless, I wandered around the house for hours before ending up in a small corner of the garage where I set up an improvised workspace. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Curiosity got the better of me, and I went to answer. I opened the door carefully, but without speaking, instinctively I took a step back. Emily entered, and I immediately realized I was still in the garage. You must have been in the garage, she remarked, closing the door behind her. I tried knocking, but you didn't hear me. I was just tidying up, I responded, noting the room's condition. Emily sighed. Well, Mom already called me. It looks like you've made up your mind about what to do with me. What did you expect, that I wouldn't mind you having an affair? I asked. She paused. I guess I wasn't thinking clearly, at least not rationally. I was overwhelmed by disappointment. It's a shame because all I did was think, I confessed. You see, there was no one around to distract me. I missed having someone to go out to dinner with, visit a club, and enjoy the darkness, whispering and kissing. But I was left with a wife who could deceive me without hesitation, who could share my house, my food, my life, and then run off to be close with someone else. Not a pleasant image, is it? Are you really ready to throw away 11 years of our life together? What happened? She asked, distressed. Did you even bother to ask me about it, John? Would it have bothered you if I'd had a real relationship with someone else instead of just playing games? I snapped. It doesn't matter anymore, does it? Now you and the guy, I can't even be bothered to remember his name, can move on freely, without caring about me. No more struggles over whom to spend our anniversary with. I think I understand your perspective, Emily replied softly. Do you really? I asked. You see, to you, it was just an act of infidelity. Maybe you justified it by blaming me. Could it be my fault that you decided to be involved with someone else? She lowered her head. No, I don't blame you. It just happened. Happened, I repeated. Carrying on an affair for 2 months doesn't just happen. It requires active planning, secrecy, sneaking around. And you did it all, telling lies to my face every day. I fell in love with you completely and unconditionally. And this is what you did. Please spare me your anger. How can you believe I don't love you after 11 years? She protested. Here's a question for you, Emily, I said. Given your deep introspection, you know how you usually react. Imagine I found out you had a one-time fling, no long-term affair, just a single moment of weakness. How would you react if it was me? To be honest, I think I'd have asked you to leave and started divorce proceedings, she admitted in a hushed tone. Thank you for your honesty, I said. That's exactly what I expected. Now imagine I carried on an affair for nearly 3 months, lying to you every single day while my heart belonged to someone else. Can you honestly claim to love me after 13 years together? You're acting like you don't care about our time together. Those 11 years mean a lot to me, Emily insisted. It wasn't just casual conversation. I enjoyed being with you. Then tell me, do you remember the last time we were close? The last time you initiated a kiss? I asked. After what I've witnessed, it's impossible to believe you're standing here telling me you love me. I'm not a fool. I overheard you discussing him with Lisa the moment he arrived at the office. Then you two even planned a gift for her for bringing you together. It seems you've already got your next bridesmaid lined up. Just need a best man for the ceremony, right? Emily stared at me speechless. You're just like me after all, she finally said. Should I expect a process server to show up at my doorstep? I need to know where you plan to live, I replied. You won't see a process server because I'll bring the papers myself. That's it, game over. I'm done waiting for you to decide whether to stay or leave. You clearly have strong feelings for him, and he can have you. Don't ever think you can come back here. I can't forget or forgive, and obviously, I'm not your priority. She looked at me. So you're kicking me out and keeping everything for yourself. It's unfair after 11 years. It always comes down to fairness, doesn't it? I said. Yes, I'm staying in this house. I assumed you and your new man already had a plan. His name is Mark, she corrected, and of course he has a place. So problem solved, I remarked. That's why you're here. He doesn't want to divorce his own wife for you, does he? She froze. How did you know he was married? Rolling my eyes, I answered, come on, so he won't leave his wife for you, and you actually thought you could come back to me. Look, as far as I'm concerned, we're done. You made that choice the moment you started that affair. Remember those amazing 2 months you cherished. I'm sure you'll have fond memories, but when I gave you the ring back, I meant it, we're finished. Don't cry about 11 years that meant nothing to you. Fine, she said wearily. I'll find a new place. I may take a lot of the furniture, though. Sure, just let me know so I'm not around, I replied. She pulled the ring out of her pocket. What should I do with this? Whatever you want, I said. A pawn shop won't give you much, maybe $130, but hey, it's your ring. She shook her head. I'll call you in a few days. All right, I said. You know where everything is. I noticed her frown as she went upstairs to check what I'd packed. She rummaged through the bedroom, the closet, and the bathroom. A few minutes later, she returned downstairs with a floral zip-up bag for her cosmetics. You were thorough, she said. You only missed a few things. I might have to call you again when it's time to move. No problem, I replied, as long as it's not too close to me. When she suggested going for a walk, I raised an eyebrow. Wouldn't it be too much trouble to run instead? I asked, keeping a serious face. Kiss me right here and now, she said, turning to leave. I wouldn't dare kiss someone who's been God knows where, I retorted, closing the door behind her. And that marked the end of our communication. 3 months later, my lawyer filed the necessary divorce documents, instructing me to pick them up on a Monday. My itinerary was simple: lawyer's office first, then Linda and Martin's house. My only goal was to obtain Emily's signature on the documents. After parking at her parents' house, I stood outside for a moment, gazing at the familiar facade. I knew this final step would bring me closer to a quieter life. Exiting the car, I made my way to the door and rang the bell. Linda answered. Well, John, what brings you here? What's going on? She asked. I thought you'd forgotten about us. I replied, not yet. Is Emily here? Yes, she's here. Come in, Linda said. She called out, and Emily soon joined us. Emily, I began, I have the papers here for you to sign. I'll file them tomorrow, and that will finalize our divorce. I just want this to be over. She sighed. I don't think I've ever been good enough for you, have I? Are you really going to do this? I didn't say anything, just handed her the documents. Emily briefly stepped out of the room, returning with a pen in hand. Without a word, she signed her name on the dotted lines. I watched her closely. Finishing with a flourish, she set the pen down. Free now, she said. Thank you for signing. Take care of yourself, I answered quietly. Then, shifting my focus, I added, Linda, you can come in. Congratulations to you as well. I left and drove away. A wave of mixed emotions washed over me, but I knew our relationship had ended. Life was about to take a new turn. A month later, our divorce was finalized, ushering in a completely different chapter of my life. Not long after, I received unexpected news from Martin, her father. He informed me that after our divorce, Emily had asked Mark to leave his wife and marry her, but he refused. He admitted he had no real romantic feelings for her, revealing that their relationship had been purely physical. After such a revelation, Emily was forced to come to terms with living without me and without Mark. She ended up moving back in with her parents, looking for a new job after being disgracefully dismissed from her old one, just like Mark was, thanks in part to how the whole situation had played out. According to Martin, Emily is unhappy. She's had several encounters, but they've been with married men looking only for a fling or men with questionable reputations. Engaging in indiscriminate relationships led Emily to contract this psychiatric issue, and she's now in therapy. As for me, I've chosen to move forward, determined to find a measure of peace and begin a new life without the woman I once thought would never betray me.